much for joining me today.
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. It's been a really good weather, actually. Yeah, it's been pretty good.
So, Andrew, I invited you today on the podcast because I have this segment called Millennials Create. And I know that you have been working on
Yeah.
a lot of projects. You already sent me a lot of your projects, like your book club, your article writing, podcasting, and making several articles. But I want to know a little bit more because that's just a
Yeah.
general thing that I know. So, do you mind, like, kind of explaining the
hmm
projects that you have going on?
So I have like four projects. Actually, I have four, but we're working on to like seven projects. Like we have like this. I have like in this board right now that is just a lot of filled of like ideas. I have like this godlike mind, but yeah, we have four projects, which is one with my book club, which is called Forest in the Eyes, which was inspired because of a conversation I had with my friend about nature and like philosophy and books and just that in general, that like, oh, I'm really interested at books, and I have never interested in book clubs at all until like that conversation comes in, and I was like, I might love start reading and have conversations with people. And then that lead into podcasting, which is in conversation, which is a podcast I started last year on actually February, but I started a podcast way before then. So I had two podcasts before in conversation, but they were just like in the side, very fun, bad audio quality, no mic. And I remember it was all recorded in my mom's kitchen. Like you can just hear like the busy pans
I think
of
all of
like
us started
just
from a
anything.
really
It's
bad
just
audio.
yeah, 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 like a very bad audio. Like there's no equipment, and my friend was like, "This is bad. No one can listen to it." And he started funding our podcasts through my friend's NGO project. So I was working with my friend's NGO project for recycling, like a small recycling food plan project that he did. So I started doing that, and the funds were like, he's like, I'm gonna take like, because I'm like, I wanted to do my podcast, and I want you to be my first guest. Is like, do you want to do it? And he's like, he was like very hesitant. He's like, no, I'm not gonna do it. He's very shy. He was like, I'm willing to fund your podcast for your equipment and this mic and everything, like the audio and editing and everything. And it just starts up from there. And it just, our relationship starts to become like, I think very close. Like he's one of my closest friends like ever in homeschool. It's pretty amazing. And that started off like all this idea, those other two ideas, like interest of photography and what else? I read like just music subgroups and journalism in a way, like finding new artists and like collecting vinyls and just having that, I think, fun sized mind for a Gen Z. Like they have like this idea like, oh, I'm so inspired by example, like I'm inspired by like, I don't know, like Ariana Grande, like that's for example, like, oh, I want to be like a pop star like her. I'm just gonna record like all my songs from that. Like I want to be like really big and everything. And it's kind of like that. Like, oh yeah, I want to be like become something greater at the same time, like being myself in a way. And that's what I've done in the past two projects for the podcast and the book club, and I'm focusing on that more um, than the music genre, like for like researching and journalism for newer artists. Even though I've been doing it for I think past 4 years, which is insane.
Yeah, that's a lot
And
of
how
work.
I started to
Like that's a
Yeah, it's a
lot of
lot of work,
That's a lot of work
and
coming from you. I think you're doing so much, which is great. But I think we want to know like, oh, like how old are you? Are you in school? Are you in college? Like these things take
oh,
process and
yeah.
for your age that's a lot. So you can introduce yourself and like what you do.
So I've been doing those 4 projects like I mentioned, and how it all started podcasting. So I started podcasting at 16 with no equipment or anything. And 17, I've started doing a little music research for like journalism since I really wanted um, to study music as a major. I couldn't because I don't play musical instruments. Like I'm really bad. Like yeah, I do play drums when I was 5, and then that stopped because of my um ADHD. Like I struggle ADD when I was young. I was diagnosed. And yeah, that's why it's been really messy for the 4 projects I've been working on. This like a lot of projects, and it's really overstimulating, and it really hurts for a guy um that has so many interests on many things. And that's why I'm focusing on those 2 projects more, which is the podcast book club, because that's like started to blossom in a way. And yeah, I'm in homeschooled, so I'm actually used to go to the same school with you. After 1 year, one grade apart, which
We
is
did. We
amazing.
did
Which
indeed.
is yeah, yeah, which is very interesting. But yeah, so when I was in Espaha, I couldn't create in the same school with you. I couldn't create that much creative stimulant because of the people I'm surrounding with a little bit.
Same.
Like there's like I had no no one has the same similar interest what I have, and they're just like, okay, you do you, and we're trying to support you, but we couldn't. Uh, but yeah, but that was like the during that point, I remember I was feeling a little bit I'm feeling a little bit sad and depressed because no one is empathizing of what I have as a diagnosis for ADD, like this impulsivity. And during that time I remember I was like, oh, I can't I wanted to learn how to play the guitar, but I couldn't because fingers are like my finger coordinations weren't that great, so I couldn't play like the guitar. But I start to learn the piano like um last couple of months ago during quarantine. So I'm like getting back into learning music because I was so inspired by just a lot of people like my friends and you in general, like the music that you've been releasing with Hal and everything just makes me like really excited that I want to go back to music in a way. And that's the fun part, I would say, of when your friends are creating something that's very meaningful to them and makes you want to inspire and you want to do it for yourself.
I agree. I think talking about the community that we were in, I think there was a lot of things that we couldn't do just because
Mm.
maybe peer pressure purposes, but I think also the support of the community, although it is a supportive community, there are some things that is just not able to be done. I don't know how else to rephrase it.
Yeah, because we're in a school that's like not very secular-ish, so like
Yeah,
they don't
yeah.
branch out to be secular subjects. and yeah, I mean that's how the story goes. Like my after I went to homeschool, I started meeting these my 4 amazing friends, which is Christian. Um, he's a great guy. He's in Sydney right now, and he's studying carpentry. I have friends that are very creative in their own minds, like their child likes, like one of them. And the one thing that stood out from that experience than the previous experience I believe is empathy, and that showing of empathy and knowing that, oh, this person really likes, for example, this person really likes cooking, then I want him to push on that. Like, what made you do it? Why you start doing it? Is it because of your parents? They ask like those deep, full meaning conversations. And I feel like during that time, I was like, there's a spark that I want to do podcast again because I want to like because all my friends were like, "Hey, you're really good at talking variations of subjects. Why can't you just start a podcast and talk with many people that have niche topics and niche opinions, like hot takes in a way that are very interesting for people to listen to and hear and get inspired." And that was like, I was like, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe I do it, and I want to try on doing it. And so far, um, we have reached my podcast has reached like 100 plays because of my friends' overwhelming support, like advice, like you should do it and you should branch out in the world, like start communicating with people's guests around the world, and just social networking. And that has like really inspired me a lot and start creating. And just branch out to many other projects. Like I'm like, oh, I really wanted to do this, and I really want to be like a creative director in a way, and that really excites me. So it all started from.
That's awesome. So, Andrew, I also want to ask you, like, that's a lot of, I mean, being a creative director, it takes a lot of passion and hard work. I think like in I think the moment I started like podcasting and being in this like digital creative world, I realized that um people who make
Mm,
content on the internet actually put so much effort. It's a lot of effort to make content,
yeah,
to
a
be able
lot.
to produce it, to be able to like get the audience and the
Mm-hmm.
outreach. It's a lot of work. So
Mm-hmm.
aside from podcasting and aside from just anything, what are some hobbies you do? A side hobby you want to do or something to get your mind off things?
Well, um, I love surfing, but that's like not accessible here in Jakarta. It's like the beaches are the beaches don't allow you to surf or anything.
That's true.
And I had to travel like 2 hours to Bogor just to surf, like down the beach there, like around that area. And other hobbies, well, I love to jog, I love to run, I love going to see nature around. Um, I love coffee. I love
Me
drinking
too. I
coffee
have
in a
a
way.
addiction to caffeine.
Coffee really helps me. It really helps my focus a little bit and productivity. I love just doing phone calls with my friends and just talk about, I don't know, random stuff of life, like what's going on in their life, what's going on in my life. I mean, yeah, like professional side effects like music and photography. Um, like those are the topics like I usually with my friends sometimes. And for them, they're like, Drew, this is getting too sick. But they're like, they really love it because they're like, "It's so Drew of you." That's like, that no one can get, like, there's no one that talk like that. Like, no one talks like that in any subject or any topic. It's like, it's only you that it's so easy because you're so compliable. And I mean, like, I just keep doing it. Like, when I do my podcasts and any things like as a content creator, it's like what you see when you get to know me when as friendships or anything. And that's what's really cool, I would say. And I would say that's an advice for some people that want to start is to get like-minded friends that will always have your back and motivates you, wants you to be inspired.
Yeah, I agree because I think being able to stand out and put out a project is a lot of, it takes a lot of courage. And like what you said about surrounding yourself with friends that support you, I 100% agree with you. Okay, so I want to ask you actually, this is the next question. When it comes to community and friends, where do you find your
Yeah. Yeah.
support? Where do you find your support that you feel like, oh, I feel safe around them, but at the same time, I feel like they push me to my best. So where do you find that kind of support?
Well, it started off from homeschool, and I have homeschool friends that, well, most of my homeschool friends are like, we're in the same batch. And one of them are doing like online classes like way before we're hitting COVID and everyone's taking online classes. Apparently, that's the norm. Yeah. So I have friends that are from around the world through the net, which is from Reddit, but that's because of my homeschool friends that introduced me to like sub communities like subreddits and yeah, like I talk to people like I have like these two guys from Maryland, and we're become like super close, which is really weird. But, oh, like like I was like thinking that if I reach out to them, this is weird. Why would a guy from Indonesia would like who's this kid? Like why does he want to be so interested to be friends with me, even though we're in the same Reddit of talking music and everything? And yeah, I think that's the part of our relationship that keeps going of the similar interests. And I think that really does help me push forward as a creative stimulant. But yeah, like there are some support from my friends in homeschool and also in church too. And those friends that were like, Drew, I really love that you are doing this. I want you to keep doing it because if you don't, if I'm not doing it what I'm doing right now, I honestly wouldn't be very talented as a person or like very patient or very empathetic. So I gotta keep on doing it, keep believing in myself that I can do something.
Yeah, that's important. I think what you said about like being empathetic is very, it's one of the things that is hard to learn, but you kind of have to have that kind of skill to
Hmm.
survive. And
Hmm.
just having that moral
Hmm.
support is nice. So, Andrew, I want to ask about back to your
Definitely.
project again, the four projects you have. Do you mind listing to our audience each one of them and then kind of telling them, how do they get access to this project? Because I'm going to link everything below.
All right. So you can actually, for my podcast, you can just type in conversation on the podcast with and my first name and last name. It will be there. It's every streaming services. But yeah, if you want to go further more, like what my music genre heads or anything, like what I've wrote and interview some upcoming new artists or anything, you can follow my Instagram. There's a lot in there. I would say there are journal entries in Instagram. I don't know the app. Hold on, let me take a look at it. It's so in my Instagram, yeah, you could just search it up in my Instagram profile. There's a link down below to my website. You could just look at that for the articles. There's only two because um, there are some future projects that I've been doing that is like still in the works because I haven't gotten permission from their managers or the person themselves as from their creative. But yeah, you can just search it up through there mostly. I'm a very open person, so
Andrew, I also want to ask just to kind of like wrap up our conversation, like what you said about like how you struggle with ADHD and ADD, and like you're still doing so many things. I mean, that's amazing. Like, not a lot of people have the courage or the willingness to even be like, despite my limitations, I want to still be doing things that makes me a better person. What inspires you to do that?
it's just for me it's from friends that encourage me to read books. So my friend Caleb encouraged me to read books even though I didn't like reading, and that teaches me a lot to be empathetic. Like it's okay that I have lack of focus or anything. Like it's like yeah, it seems demotivating, but it's when I start to realize like reading books from whether that's like from doctrines or theology or anything that's philosophy, I start to like reevaluate. So whenever I read, my friend just told me that you're not my friend just told me, since you hated reading, can you write a summary down? like just journal and just journal it down, like what have you been reading and like what interests you, or what piques you on that. And that really does help me a little bit for my AD process a little bit, like just taking notes. Like if I didn't get the stuff done like on day one, then I'm like, it's okay, we could do it tomorrow. Like there's no need to rush. Like it's way better to do things slowly, not in a hurry, in a way that's like it's just messy. Like people are confused. And the results too. So I would say that's like a little bit of my I would say my advice is just to take things slow. Don't blame yourself. For your ADD. Don't blame people. Since I'm like a religious person in a way, like, I always prayed, and sometimes like music does soothe those feelings and emotions. Like, oh, I'm feeling down. I'm feeling hatred. I'm like, I I don't know, but I I don't know if this is weird to you or anything. I don't know if people do this, but I set a timer for myself to cry in the afternoon. That's a way in my schedule. I said like, oh, this is my session to cry for 15 minutes. I'll cry on something
That's not
just to
weird.
let things
I
out
don't
of the
think
negative
that's
emotion.
weird. I think that's a very, I
Really?
think,
Okay.
yeah, that's a very, personally for me, I think, with the world that we live, I feel like everybody's trying to be perfect when it's really non-existent. Like everybody has
Mm-hmm.
something within them that they find is limited, or like that they find a problem, but everybody seems to be covering up. And like what you said, that's a very like transparent action. That's very raw, and I think that's very nice because you're taking time for yourself to acknowledge the feeling, and then you're like, this is what I got to do to like move on and stuff. Actually, I actually kind of do something
Yeah.
similar to this. I don't have a crying time, but I do have like a time of the day where I choose to settle down and like filter out my thoughts and like put it in my planner, or like
Mm-hmm.
just some sort of paper so I can like organize and structure everything. I think it's very transparent, and I kind of like the idea of that. I should set up mine too. I should set up my crying time.
Yeah. I set that timer. I was like, okay, I'm gonna find like a song that's like really upsetting. And what was like, what's so funny was that I remember last 2 days ago, I my song just started playing like I don't know the new Taylor Swift album, which is pretty good. She's a queen. Um, so that for as a sad song, I kind of forgot what it was, but it was a sad ballad song, and I remember I was crying. I heard from my neighbor, my neighbor and my friend was like texting me, "Are you okay, dude? Like you've been like been playing this song for 2 straight hours," and I was like, "No, I needed to get my emotions off because I was like I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be happy like sooner. So yeah, I had to get the negative feelings and emotions out first. So yeah, it really does help for my ADD. Also, like since I'm working a lot and being productive, it's just setting schedules. Even though like I hate creating schedules, like oh, I was like, we have to do this again. Like it's being so repetitive because the ADD brain is like I have like this. I can focus on one thing, but then there's just many strings. Like it's just messy. It's like there's many strings coming in, pulling in the one string, and it's just hard because I'm trying to get this treasure and these sticky webs that are they're just blocking it, and that's like my brain in a way. So like that for me, it's just to make schedules and take a time for yourself and manage.
That's really nice. Just to kind of close up the podcast, I want to ask you, um, what is one quote you live by that you would like people to know, or like people to be
Mhm.
inspired by?
So there's this one quote. I know this is gonna be so cliche. It's everyone wants it, like every artist or every creative or everyone th- is to be yourself. it's to find yourself and be yourself. Because if you love, I don't know, if you love listening to K-pop and like want to make a K-pop, I don't know, a fashion line or anything, go do it. Like, just do it. Find those people that really love you and care about you and wanted you to improve of this hobby and subject, and just go for it. There's no one stopping you. And if people hate it, well, that sucks on them, because that's not, that's not in their interest or anything. And that's mostly like the world was like, we had to be like the next big thing, right? You had to be like, oh, Steve Jobs or Magnus Carlsen, who's like a chess king. Like, you had to be like, everyone wants to be someone else, like wants to be in that level, right? Like, wants you to be like, oh, the next big thing. But it turns out like, expectation, if you follow those expectations, you're not gonna go through with it, because you're not being yourself, being like someone else in a way. And I know for you it might be hard making music, because it's like, how do I process myself to be like, this is truly from me and it's not from other people else, like from anyone else. I think that's like the hardest part, is to realize that you have to be yourself and surrounding people, and take inspiration. Don't copy. That's one of the things I learned through the interviews I've done with musicians and artists. Don't copy, don't plagiarize. If the school tells you, well, that's great. I'll follow that. You can take inspiration, but just don't copy. It's one of the things that's gonna hit you forever. So yeah, yeah.
Well, Andrew, that's my question. I don't really have any more questions for you. So thank you so much for being on my podcast. For everyone who's watching, I will link all the things that Andrew said below, his book club and interview and podcast. Please stream Coffee and Conversation on Spotify, YouTube, and other platform, and follow both of us on Instagram. And I will see you guys next week. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Andrew, for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's really great.